So when you think that I actually do charge for my consultations, you guys are basically getting all this good information for free. Okay? So please pay attention. Interlocking has become way more common of recent, I think, because of the uptick with people who are wanting sister locks. Interlocking is a technique. Okay? It's not a hairstyle. So you know how we have sister locks. Sister locks is a whole hair system. Okay, it has like a whole set of like an entire checklist that you need to check off in order to be able to say you have sister locks. It's a hair system. Okay, interlocking is just like the way you have twists, you know, two-strand twists, the way you have braids. Okay, interlocking is a method of installing locks. When locks are installed with the interlocking method, the individual locks are called interlocks. Okay, so because interlocking is a method that is used to install sister locks are a type of interlocks. And I'm going to create a whole different video about that, so I don't want to dwell on it here. Okay, but suffice it to say that when it comes to the different locking methods, you have the freeform, the semi-freeform, the comb coils, finger coils. I like to put those in the same category because the only difference is that with comb coils, you're using a comb to get that perfect round cylindrical shape that is hollow on the inside. With finger coils, you're not using a comb, you're basically just twisting around your finger, but at the end of the day, you still get that cylinder that is relatively hollow on the inside. And then you have twists, which also give you a cylindrical kind of shape, but not perfectly smooth on the outside. Okay, it's still a cylinder, it's still hollow on the inside, but it's not perfectly smooth on the outside. And then you have braid locks, which tend to be flat front to back. And I think some people just don't like braid locks. They don't like the look of it, which is okay. You know, different people like different things. But one of the reasons people tell you that they don't like braid locks is that it doesn't give you that perfect cylindrical shape that you're looking for. Again, this is true only to an extent. For those who have looser curl textures, they still do end up getting a relatively cylindrical shape even with braid locks. Okay, and I'll talk a bit more about that when I start talking about lock maturation, the different stages of lock maturation. But yeah, to a certain degree, if you have tighter curls, so if you are more within the 4C category and even some 4Bs, if you start with braid locks, I think, and I don't even know what to call this a disadvantage. It's not necessarily a disadvantage. It just depends on the way you look at it. But one of the things you would notice if you start with braid locks and you have a tighter curl pattern is that your the braid pattern may never disappear if your curls are really, really tight and kinky, or they may take a relatively longer time to disappear. I'm talking 5-7 years. In fact, I've seen people who have had braid locks in for upwards of 5 years who, I mean, if you go really, really close to them, you can still see the braid pattern in some of their locks. This is less common for people who start with comb coils, finger coils, and twists, okay, because the structure is much looser. As a general rule, if the structure or the method you're starting with would give you a looser structure, then the pattern tends to disappear more quickly. Let me say that again. If the method that you're starting your locks with gives you a structure that is looser, then the pattern that you find on installation day tends to disappear much more quickly. Okay, and that's the reason why you find that people with comb coils, finger coils, two-strand twists um, tend to lose their pattern, right, much more quickly than people who do braid locks. All right, I mentioned interlocking. Interlocking in many ways is kind of similar to braid locks. In fact, I've had people, clients who didn't know much about it say, when they see it for the first time, they're like, is this not braids? Because they really look pretty similar. And my answer usually is, it is, but it isn't. Because interlocking, what it is the reverse braid. All right. So for those of you who can braid, you realize that when you start braiding, you braid from the bottom, right? You braid from the scalp all the way to the tip. With interlocking, you are installing the braid from the tip of the hair. All right. So after you've done your initial, whatever it is you do to secure the tips, you then begin your interlocking, and you can see how frizzy my locks still are, even after almost 3 years. You then begin your interlocking, and you keep going and going and going and going until you get to the scalp. With braids, is the reverse. You start from the scalp and you go down this way. So the finished result may look somewhat similar to the untrained eye, but they are different. Because of the way braids are started and because of the hand positioning when you're doing your braid, the structure tends to be much tighter, okay? And that's the reason why the pattern disappears so slowly. With interlocking, because you're starting from here and going up, right? And because of the hand positioning, the structure is looser. Not quite as loose as a two-strand twist, but still looser than a braid. And that's the reason why if one person does braids and another person does interlocking, you find that within, let me say, sometimes a year to 2 years, the person with interlocking has completely lost that braid structure of the interlocking pattern, whereas the person with the braid, you can still pretty much see the braid pattern in their hair. All right, not that it matters, but these are just a few things to know if you care about those kind of things. All right, but if you're somebody who has a very loose curl pattern, my advice to you would be to go with either braid locks or interlocks. If you install braid locks and interlocks, that thing you hear about people trying to avoid water, that's a whole nother video. I'm not going to go into that today. But if your interlocks are done right, or if your braid locks are done right, the whole thing about avoid water becomes completely unnecessary. On the other hand, if you install micro twists or comb coils, especially if you did it with product, okay, or finger coils, then you need to be very, very afraid of water, at least in the initial stages. All right. So for those of you who have heard, I hear people say, the only problem I have with locks is that people with locks don't wash their hair. It's not true. People with locks wash their hair. You're probably reacting to people who got their locks installed with comb coils or, palm rolling or finger coils, who use some form of holding product, who, because a lot of those things are gel based, once they come in contact with water, what the water does is to, soften it, and then the whole structure completely unravels. All right. So if you're somebody who sweats a lot, you work out a lot, you do water sports, you swim, then finger coils, comb coils, basically anything that involves some form of folding product, it's probably not the way to go. All right. You should be looking to do your installation with a method that uses some sort of tool, something that is manual, okay, so that regardless of whether water touches it or not, the structure remains relatively stable. Having said that, I've had clients who had let me say 4B hair for most of their hair, and then in the nape and around the sides above their ears, their curl pattern is much looser. For such people, even with interlocking, they might experience some unraveling or slippage. Um, and so what I do in such cases, if the client doesn't mind, and of course a discussion will be had. I'm not going to do something like that without telling you ahead of time. We might do interlocking for the majority of your hair, but in the areas where the hair is really fine, really soft, we might offer you braid locks. Okay, but that's something that we will always have a conversation about. Some people opt to take a chance, if they're just really concerned about having a uniform pattern throughout. Some people will be like, what, let's just interlock everything. I'll take my chances. If it unravels, I'm happy to come back and pay for a reinstall. And some people are like, what? Because I always tell people, look, here's the thing. Regardless of how you start, whether you do comb coils, finger coils, micro twists, braid locks, interlocking, every other style, okay, except for freeforming, regardless of how you start, in 5 years, it would take a trained loctician to be able to look at your hair and say, okay, yeah, this is a method you started with. Unless, of course, if you got braid locks and your hair type is the really kinky type, then yes, if somebody came really close to you and looked at the individual locks, they may be able to see your braid pattern. But outside of that, if you started, with any other one, it would take a trained loctician to be able to tell. And some of them might not even be able to tell, okay? Depending on how loose your curl pattern is. 5 or 7 years down the line, nobody will be able to tell, oh, you started with this method, So where the method becomes important is the kind of lifestyle you live, whether you're somebody who, like I said earlier, comes in contact with water a lot, whether you're somebody who needs to look polished all the time, because the method of installation you use determines how your locks move through the maturation phase, how they progress to maturation. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. And then the final method that I'm going to talk about today is what is known as instant locking. Okay, so that's basically where you go in with your loose natural hair, and by the time you stand up, however many hours later, you look like somebody who has had their locks for 5 years or more. Okay, and the people who usually opt for this kind of locks are people who do not want to be bothered with the hassle of progressing, you're doing the organic progression through all the stages of maturation. In quotes, they want to skip the ugly stage. I don't like to call it the ugly stage. I call it the awkward phase. Okay, so if you're somebody who doesn't want to have to deal with that all the drama that comes with the awkward phase, then maybe instant locking is for you. All right, the advantage of instant locking, just like braid locks and interlocking, is that it's a very, very stable structure. You could literally finish and wash your hair right away, or go jump in a pool, and nothing will be affected. Your locks might become a little bit frizzier than they were before you jumped into the pool, but your locks will definitely not unravel. There will be no slippage, nothing. Okay, so those are the things to keep in mind. Keep in mind when we start talking about pricing, okay, that the more stable the lock is after installation, and the longer it takes to install your locks, the higher the price for installation will be. And so when I say this, I'm talking specific. The ones that tend to be on the higher end of the spectrum when it comes to pricing are interlocking and instant locking. Okay, for people who start with braid locks, micro twists, finger coils, comb coils, I tell people that you could literally be doing all those methods and watching TV along with your clients. No cap. if you've been in this loctician business for long enough, you could literally be doing those things. I mean, once you've laid your grid, you could be doing your comb coils, your finger coils, your micro twists, your braid locks, and be watching TV, having a good conversation along with your client. However, if you are installing locks using interlocking or instant locking, you cannot be watching TV. You can't be watching TV and doing it right. I don't want to dwell on this, but for those of you who have wound up with holes in your locks, let me just say that things are happening in the lock world. If you sit in a loctician's chair and the loctician is watching TV with you, is following the movie or the program and running commentary, stand up, forfeit your deposits, and run away. I'm serious. So that it will not end in tears. With all the other methods, you can comfortably be distracted, have your eyes anywhere else. But with interlocking and instant locking, you cannot afford to be distracted. Your eyes have to be on the lock that you are installing from start to finish. Okay? There's a reason why. And that's why when locticians quote you the price for interlocking and instant locking, it can never be the same as the price from micro twists or braids or braid locks, comb coils, and finger coils. Those ones take a way shorter time and they require less focus and less concentration. If a loctician charges you the same price for interlocking and instant locking as they charge for braid locks or micro twists, they don't know what they are doing. They don't. Stand up, forfeit your deposits, and run away. You've been warned. Okay. Moving on, I'm definitely going to, in fact, this is probably going to be a 3-part series or a 3 or 4-part series because there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure many of you watching this, especially if you already have locks, can already identify with some of the things I've said. If you've ever had to pay to have your lock, your grid reconstructed or your locks repaired because of holes, because of irregularities in the outline, because of slippage, because of thinning, and you remember that you are watching a movie while you are getting your hair done, your loctician was watching the movie with you. Now you know why. Okay? I'm not saying, right, that a conversation cannot be had, especially, I mean, if your loctician is not a trainee, if this is somebody who has been in the business for a good long while, yes, they can maintain, most good locticians can maintain a conversation with you while they're doing their interlocking or instant locking. But one thing you will notice is that while they're talking to you, but their eyes are not on you. Their eyes are on what they're doing. Only rarely might they look up into the mirror, maybe when they're reaching for another strand of hair, or they're about to cut out another piece of hair. But for the most part, if they're interlocking or instant locking, they can talk to you, right? But their eyes are going to be on what they're doing. If somebody is instant locking or interlocking your hair and their eyes are on the TV or their eyes are they're making eye contact with you in the mirror throughout, stand up, get up, pick your bag, and leave. Okay, moving on.